Hello, and thanks for joining us for this deep dive discussion. My name is Ben, and it's my honor to sit across the rug from Pastor Shawn, the lead pastor of Family Worship Center in Lakeland, Florida. Our goal for these conversations is to dig deeper into the gospel of God as we unpack some key points from Pastor Shawn's Sunday messages. We hope this will be a catalyst for discipleship in your life and hopefully lead to more conversations with your family, friends, and in your small groups. Pastor Shawn, welcome.
Hey, thanks.
To our new environment.
Yeah, right.
If Pastor Shawn's in a little bit of a bad mood this morning, it's because I asked him how the Dallas Cowboys did when he walked in the door. But he is wearing his shoes again.
Yeah, always. Fan to the end.
Fan to the end. He's a true fan. So I'm going to reverse the way we start a little bit this morning. You just ended the series Resilience yesterday. We've been in the 6-week series. And 'tis the season. I just got caught up on the debate from the previous week, presidential election year.
Yeah.
Debates are happening. So my tendency to ask you at the end of this series is, do you have any closing arguments? But I'll phrase it like this. If you were to put it in one or two sentences, if you were to condense this entire six-week series to one or two sentences that you want Family Worship Center to walk away with, and the people that are following online, that you want them to absolutely know, what would it be?
Yeah. Be aware that you are in a battle, and God has given you every weapon you need to win those battles. So use them wisely and win.
Sweet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you've been in the same passage the last 2 weeks, Ephesians 6, verses 10 through 18. And you kind of drew out 1 week, over the last 2 weeks, you drew out 1 week, kind of half of it, and you drew out yesterday the remaining half of it. And in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, it says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." So we've put on the whole armor of God, that moment of salvation where we say yes to Jesus.
Yeah.
But then you also drew out that we take up the armor of God. It's this daily decision to wake up and follow Jesus. For the very purpose, we put on the armor of God for the very purpose to withstand the enemy, right? So in verse 12, what does it mean that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood? Because isn't the flesh one of these enemies that we have to deal with, wrestle with every single day? Or is it talking about something different, just like two countries in a battle, that flesh and blood type battle?
Yeah, it's the opposing flesh, not the personal flesh.
Okay.
So it's not the person that's in front of me that is being used by the devil that I'm wrestling, or the person in front of me that's promoting the world, or the person in front of me who isn't managing their own flesh. That's actually not my problem. My problem is the motivator behind it all. And so I think when I can deal with that, it allows me to continue to be kind to people and understanding of who they are and their story in front of me, while not giving a pass to the enemy who is actually trying to hurt me and hold me back. For sure.
So it's like the story of Peter. You talked about it yesterday where Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan." And we've talked about this before. Yeah. He wasn't upset with Peter. Yeah. He wasn't mad at Peter. It was the motivator behind Peter's words to keep him from the will of God. Yep. And so it's this thing of what you're saying is, my battle's not with Peter. My battle is with Satan because he's influencing people in the world. Yep. And I have to be able to look past the person and understand the motivator and the influence behind it. Yep. And that ultimately is the purpose is to destroy me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, think about it. If somebody like Peter said, "You don't have to go to the cross," Peter can move on. He can go on home. He can go do whatever he's doing. You'll still sit there and wrestle with, "I don't have to go to the cross. I don't have to." What are you wrestling with? Not Peter. He's gone. You're wrestling with what was planted in your mind or your heart. What was the motivator behind those words to get into your head? It was the enemy. So when we recognize that, rather than being frustrated that Peter said that, I'm actually frustrated that the enemy said it, and I'm going to do the battle in my mind necessary to find clarity and peace and get those thoughts far from me.
That's good. Going back, it brings awareness, because I think a lot of times we get distracted today with like, that person, whatever. Yeah. We get so frustrated with the person, and all of a sudden we don't like this person. Yep. We become indignant toward them, frustrated toward them, and that's where we toil in our mind. Yeah. It's like, I don't like this person. They said this. Yeah. They're on my nerves. Yeah. I don't want to bump into them. And not being aware it's the enemy trying to get in our minds, to destroy us, to derail us from obeying God and being on track with his plan for our lives. So I would say that would be crucial in the conversation, is just to be aware.
100%.
Just to be aware of the daily activity of what's going on. What would bring that awareness?
Yeah, I think your emotional response, for me, is what brings the awareness. So if someone says something like rude, that I interpret as rude, that my response to that lets me know, okay, that is intended to be a trigger. That is intended to be a temptation for me. Because of that, I know my emotion. I know my blood pressure went up, or maybe you turned red, or there was a physical response. There is the obvious awareness that that was not helpful for who you are. Now I have to say, okay, wait a minute. Was that intended to help me? If it was, then great, I need to accept the criticism as constructive. Or was it intended to hurt me? Okay, now I need to receive or understand the criticism was to hold me back. That's what I'm going to have to wrestle with. Now, if it was, because we all have friends say stuff we don't like.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's helpful, though. So, again, back to, were they the mouthpiece of God because that was something helpful, constructive to lift me up, even if I interpreted it incorrectly? Or was it something to tear me down? So my emotional response for me is kind of the wake-up call to be aware of, what was it that was just said? Was it to help? Was it to hurt? If it was to hurt, let me wrestle with it, get it out. Was it to help? Let me apply that to my life and be better.
Yeah. Question, are you likely more to get offended someone saying something that has criticism with it from a friend or close friend or a family member, or from someone you don't know? Or maybe you know them, but you don't have a relationship with them?
Yeah, definitely somebody closer.
Okay.
For sure.
Are you more likely, even though you're more likely to get offended, are you more likely to receive it because it comes from somebody closer, if it is something to be received, or from somebody that you don't know as well?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like maybe everybody's not like this. I wrestle more with backhanded comments.
Which is not really, that there's no constructive criticism in a backhanded comment.
Yeah, I don't like passive aggressive.
Yeah.
At all, no matter who it comes from. I think if you're a stranger or you're a loved one and you say, hey, let me help you with this, or hey, let me tell you something about what you just did, I'll probably receive it. Doesn't mean I'll pay attention, but I'll hear you. Probably no matter where you came from. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me personally, I probably get more offended by those who are closest to me, but I'll probably receive it better from those who are closest to me.
Okay.
So, like, for example, I don't think anybody can offend me more than my wife, Chelsea.
Sure. Right.
But after I cool down and after I think about it and after spending some time in prayer, in hindsight, I'm like, well, there was truth in that, and I probably should adapt or change this or whatever to make myself better.
Yeah.
Because the people that are closest to us have a little bit more insight into who we are, how we work, and, honestly, could help us.
Yeah.
Especially those that really love us, and those that see our everyday and how we think, how we do. So for me, I think that would be the case. I think I would be more offended, but then in hindsight, after cooling down, I'll probably receive it better.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Iron sharpens iron. My
Absolutely.
wife sharpens me every single day.
Absolutely.
She makes me better. So 1 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul was talking to the Corinthian church, exhorting them to not let their story be the story of the people in the Old Testament, the people of Israel.
Yep.
One where their complaining literally destroyed them.
Yep.
History has a tendency to repeat itself. We have history so that we can learn from it, so that it doesn't repeat itself, but it typically does repeat itself. I would say complaining and grumbling is prevalent today.
Yep.
I mean, you just hear it all the time. You hear a lot of it.
Yep.
And honestly, I have to check myself a lot to make sure I have a good attitude, to keep my mind, keep my heart in check. Like, that's not beneficial. That's not productive. That's complaining. That's grumbling. I'm constantly have to reel this in.
Yeah.
For the lack of discipline in taming mind and tongue, how might this be affecting the church today?
Yeah. Well, I think it affects us the same way it did them, right? Like that's what you're saying. There is the history of the grumbling and complaining. When we grumble and complain, we aren't moving the ball forward. I don't actually have a problem with grumbling and complaining that is directed, so I don't want to sound like I'm going against the gospel here. What I mean by that is if someone is willing to say, hey, this is something that exists in the church isn't evangelistic enough, or the church isn't spiritual enough, whatever that might be, a complaint. Then if the purpose of that is to start a conversation about how to fix that, I'm all for it. If it's just a complaint of, I don't like the color of the wall, or that's just the only reason for that conversation is to express a complaint. There is no fix for it. That I think is problematic. But I don't know that we see a lot of that in the church today. I think a lot of the grumbling and complaining we see in the church is about everything around us. And when we are just complaining about it, I don't know that we're looking for, God, what do you want us as the church to do in this moment? What do we have to do here? Do we pray about it? Do we push people into the public forum? Do we start a ministry? Like how are we answering this problem? We have gotten into a habit of just complaining about stuff.
Yeah, so complaining about the world we live in.
Absolutely.
Maybe policies.
Yeah.
Our country.
Yeah.
Politicians.
Yeah. Oh, I complain about no bike lanes in Lakeland. I complain about the heat. I mean, why? Why? It's not helpful. I can't fix the heat. I mean, it's just complaining. Puts me in a bad mood, bad mindset.
Yeah, my neighbor. I have a neighbor. He's excellent. He's almost 89 years old. Puerto Rican. Still works in his yard. Yeah. Works hard every single day. Like, it's impressive. And he was telling me the other day, his mom lived to be 96. His dad lived to be 92. His aunt lived to be 110. Like, longevity is in his family, and he's still grinding. And it's impressive. And I'm like, I want to be like you.
That is impressive.
But he told me one day, like, I see him all the time. I'll do yard work or whatever, and he'll be out. He's always out. Okay. Oh, you can't walk out. Like, I can't walk out of my door and not see him. He's always out there. And I'm outside working in the yard, and we'll say, hey, what's going on, whatever. And I'm like, man, it's hot. He's like, no, Ben, it's not hot. He said, you have to say, it feels good. It feels good today. It feels good today. So every time I see him now, I'm drenched in sweat.
Yeah.
How you doing? Feels good, Frank.
Feels
good. We're doing good. Yes. But learning something from him, like he really doesn't ever complain.
Yeah.
And I brought this out to the young adults last service. You kind of have, and I tread lightly, okay? I'm treading lightly. But as people get older, I fit them into one of two categories. Yeah. One is pretty much bitterness. Sure. They've seen the world and all it has to offer. They've seen life at its worst. They've loved, they've lost. They've seen highs and lows of our country and different things. But then you have people, as they get older, they become more tender to the things of God and family. And just like a simple, I love you, brings a smile to their face, tears to their eyes. And it's like, I want to fit in that category, you know? And he kind of seems to fit in that category. He has seen almost 89 years of life, and he's chosen, I'm going to have a good attitude. Yeah. I'm not going to complain. I'm going to do my very best. And he's almost 89 years old, and he gets out every single day, and he works, he walks.
Awesome.
He's doing great. And it's like, that's what I want to be like. So in the process of getting there, it's like I have to be more intentional about today. Yeah. What words are coming out of my mouth, taming my mind, making sure that I'm not dwelling on things that are not beneficial, and taking up, to use your phrase, because Ephesians 6, it talks about this. We put on the armor of God, but then we take up the armor of God every single day, and it's important. Yesterday, you talked about supplications for the saints. Supplication being a deeper prayer, not one where we just say a quick prayer and move on and say, hey, I'll be praying for you, but then we really don't pray or really don't give thought to that person. You mentioned that emotion is tied to the prayer, so I'm curious, is that what deeper prayer is? Is it an emotional prayer? And if we know that we need to pray deeply, supplications on behalf of that person, intercession for that person, is there a stirring up that can get us to that place, even though we may not be emotional with that prayer in the moment? Can we get stirred up to get there as we pray? Is that what it is? Is it an emotional prayer? Emotions tied to that prayer?
I think it could be both. I do think we can be so tuned in a prayer moment where the Spirit of God praying through us, He is the inciter of the emotion, right? Like we tap into that depth that is just by the Spirit. But I also believe that emotions themselves can be the catalyst to that deep prayer. I would definitely say we see that with people we are actually concerned with. If my kids are going through something, you don't have to tell me. I can go find my prayer closet, shut the door, and I can go a long time with very strong emotions in those prayers. Deeply concerned about the outcome. Deeply concerned about touching heaven on behalf of the people I love. So I think emotion is a huge catalyst for those prayers, yes. But I also believe spending time with God and just being considerate of the saints and allowing the Spirit of God to sort of stir us up, if you will, emotionally is helpful too. Yeah. But for me, it's far deeper if my emotions are attached.
Yeah, and is supplication also equated to maybe frequency, like not just you spent 2 hours or an hour or whatever praying one night on this particular thing, but then you bring it up the next night and then the next night and then the next night. Or could it be length of time as well versus like maybe it's an emotional 5-minute prayer, but is length of time tied to that? Is supplication just kind of the whole thing? It's emotion, it's frequency, it's time. Is it just all of it?
Yeah, I think it's the prayer you pray that you deeply care about. So it seems like that will include both time, often frequency, but velocity too. So frequency and velocity for sure.
Yeah. Like you said, when it comes to your kids, you don't have to stir yourself up. It's there. You go in, you pray, and you can pray. You could pray for a while.
Absolutely.
And you could pray bawling your eyes out, and you could pray with your heart in your stomach. And then other times you go in and you know that you need to pray for something, and maybe the emotion's not there. But I found this true to be for me in prayer time. If I give thought and attention to it, like concerning thought and attention, even though the emotion's not necessarily there, but I know that it's prevalent and I know that I need to pray, sometimes I'll get there, after just praying for a while. And I believe that's the work of the Holy Spirit too.
Yeah.
That comes and meets you in that prayer. And I don't know, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I thought it was excellent yesterday, the way you drew out generational relationships.
Okay.
Younger people need to be open to the counsel of the older. The older changing their tone of communication with the younger. You had told a story about that. Every generation has those as they get older that develop this disposition toward younger generations. Like, they didn't do it the way that I did it, or we used to do it, or like, these younger people, like they just have that almost frustrated disposition. Going back to the complaining, and what's interesting, I'll at times, I'm only 32 years old, so I'm not like older, but I'll find myself like, when I was back in high school or when I was growing up or when I was a teenager, whatever. So you drew out that we can learn both ways.
100%.
Hear how the younger generations need to be communicated with, and accepting the counsel of the older that ultimately leads us to pray better.
Yeah.
That was kind of the point you were drawing out.
Yeah.
You brought out the text, watch and pray, so that we can have that relationship with someone to speak into them. Are we lacking today in generational relationships within the church, and what can we do to encourage them?
Yeah, we're absolutely lacking. The reason for the lack is you have a group of people that have been very narrow, and this, I don't know that this is a complaint, this is just a reality. You have a group of people who've been very narrow about, we're going to create this particular service for this person, and then this particular service for this person. And as a result, we've completely separated the generations. So there's never the worshiping together. There's not even the kind of intersecting with each other in the lobby together. So that just in form creates a little bit of a barrier. We also, because everything is very algorithm driven on our devices, what I get on my device probably very different than what you get. So rather than us, I noticed that with my family, we can sit down to watch a football game. And 20 years ago, I didn't have kids 20 years ago to sit on the couch and watch football with, but when it was just a 4x3 square TV, without devices in our hand, we all just watch the same commercials, listen to the same commentary. I can sit on my couch watching football like I do on Sundays with my kids, and everybody's on their device. Now, they're in front of the TV, but we're all taking in different content. Mm-hmm. So we're not necessarily sharing the moment, even though we're sharing the space. I think that contributes to that sort of lack as well. Family structures, there's a lot of brokenness in homes today. So you might have parents or kids that are just raised with just their mom or just their dad. So they would lack the maternal side or the paternal side, and therefore those grandparents. And there's a lot against us right now in terms of coming together. Wow. So I do think we need to be more intentional. Yeah.
Seeing certain things like that will help me, because you get a text on your phone or you get an email or whatever. The tendency is just to respond.
Yeah.
Let me respond to this real quick. Yesterday afternoon, late afternoon, we took our kids to the park, and we were there, and their kids were playing, mm-hmm. and there were parents lined up against the wall that were just on their phone.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I'm crying, man. Goodness. So I looked at it, and I'm like, those poor kids.
Sure, yeah.
So I turned my phone off.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
I'm going to go play with my kids.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Kids, they're amazing.
They're amazing.
But it's divisive.
Absolutely.
Devices are divisive.
Devices are divisive.
And,
yes.
And we need to be more intentional. That's excellent. Man, I didn't think you were going to answer the question in that way, but it does draw out a truth that we are dealing with today, and it's just simple distraction.
Yeah. It's structural. We're wanting to blame it on a generation and say, oh, these young people this or these old people that. The structure it's hard to pull it off.
Yeah.
We have to be intentional. You have to just put the phone away and play with your kids.
Yeah.
iPhones didn't come out till 2007.
Yeah.
My first child was born in 2004.
Yeah.
So I developed a habit of playing with them without a distraction.
Yeah.
So I could look at somebody who's having kids today and say, oh, these parents today. But I would have been just as distracted had it been available. And you break for them. You do, because you realize it's a lot hard. It's not that they can't do it. I'm not giving anybody a pass. I'm just saying it's harder to do it. And we have to be aware and intentional to get it right.
And it's interesting, like, even like older generations, Chelsea and I have this conversation from time to time, who raise their kids without cell phones or smartphones at least. It's amazing how quick you can develop that habit.
Oh.
And it's like we're all guilty of it, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know. So being more encouraging about sharing moments.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that we don't have a traditional service and a contemporary service split between the morning and the later morning.
Yeah.
We have the same service at 9 and 11. So I'm grateful for that. But it does draw a dividing line.
Yeah, for sure.
Churches are trying to reach multiple generations in doing that.
Yeah.
And I guess they probably have a greater attendance across generations because they do that.
Yeah.
But they're not in the room together worshiping Jesus.
Yeah.
And I had not thought about that. And I had not thought about the divisiveness of just simply sharing a moment in the familiar structure.
Yeah.
So that's something that we can take away, that I can take away, that our church can take away, is being intentional in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think it contributes further to, we were at the park and we saw a family friend, someone that we kind of know but not really close to. He's a young man. He's got a 2.5-year-old daughter, and him and his wife are in the midst of a divorce. And it's, again, just heartbreak all over the park, you know? And it's like, what in the world? Like, so being intentional to share those moments together, to increase family bondage, the bonding of family together. And, that's great.
Yeah.
Man, you got me. You talked yesterday about temptations that last with us a lifetime. It's a daily waking up, denying the flesh, taking up our cross, and following Jesus every day. You tied in the passage where Paul prayed 3 times for this thorn in his flesh to be removed from him, and God responded, "My grace is sufficient for you." So are you thinking, because I've read some commentary on this, and some scholars think that the thorn in the flesh was maybe a physical ailment because of the term flesh. Are you thinking it's a temptation?
I don't know.
Okay. I mean, ultimately, I guess we don't.
Ultimately, what it was is something that he dealt with in the flesh, whether it was an illness, whether it was a temptation, whether it doesn't matter. What matters is that he was going to deal with it a long time. And God said, my grace is sufficient. So whether we apply that to something of a temptation that we just have to resist a lifetime through, or something else, either way, his grace is enough.
Yeah.
Period.
Absolutely. So kind of giving Paul a little bit of a harder time, he also said, and I think you had mentioned this somewhere in the 6 weeks, that he does the things that he doesn't want to do and doesn't do the things that he knows he ought to do. What is he referencing?
Yeah, he didn't tell us.
He didn't tell us. Because my thought is like, my first thought is sin.
Sure.
Like, are you sinning? Are you doing things you ought not to do? Like, I'm just throwing it out there. Are you doing things? Are you sinning and you shouldn't be sinning and you don't want to do it? Or is it daily distraction? Not necessarily sin, but just simple.
I don't think it was sin.
Okay.
I will say I don't think it was sin.
I don't think it was either.
It doesn't seem like that is even where that text is going. Yeah. There was an interesting moment to the Corinthians where Paul says, look, I don't want to say this, but you're making me say this. You're making me be a fool because you're not listening. So here, let me go put myself up on a pedestal, and you make me be a fool because you're not honoring the gift in front of you. He didn't want to do that, but he did it. He talked about the super apostles. So he did seem to have to deal with whatever that level of disrespect was in the church towards him. Yeah. He seemed to deal with it a lot. And they were like he said, I burned to say some things. I mean, this is kind of just littered in his letters that was something, I think that was something he was dealing with constantly. So could that have been part of it? Sure.
Yeah, I don't think it was sin either, because you've made a distinction before that, like, once you say yes to Jesus, the calling of God to preach the gospel, once you say yes to Jesus, there shouldn't be like this big moral failure. Yeah. And we see that a lot today. Preachers, they of mega churches, they'll fall, and there's this big fallout with it or whatever. I wouldn't think that Paul would have been in that boat and still have written 2/3 of the New Testament.
Yeah, no.
And, like, he would have sacrificed that level of influence had he been in that boat. So I don't think it was sin either.
And he had told them, follow me as I follow Christ. Like, when you aggregate it all together, it doesn't seem to support this idea of a deep-seated sinfulness that Paul kept falling into. Yeah. I don't see that.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool. Paul got the clarity that it wasn't leaving. He prayed 3 times. God said, my grace is sufficient for you. And the lack of clarity and the temptation not leaving, and we'll use temptation there. Yeah. Should we continue to believe that it will leave and continue to pray that it will leave?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would never give up on it leaving. But I would be absolutely committed that no matter what, I'm going to serve God anyhow. Like that's what the Hebrew children said before they were thrown into the fiery furnace. Nebuchadnezzar, God will deliver us, but even if he doesn't, I'm not doing that. Yeah. So I believe God will deliver me from this temptation, but even if this temptation lasts, I'm going to serve him.
And that's never to negate the taking up the armor. No. That it is required of you to wake up, deny the flesh, crucify the flesh, take up your cross, and follow Jesus. It's not to negate that. The question was more in, like, Paul got the clarity. My grace is sufficient for you. So, okay, I prayed 3 times. Yeah. It's become evident it's not leaving. So every day I just have to be intentional about following Jesus. But I don't think, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of clarity today in regards to something with the flesh. Yeah. I don't hear people say it anyway. It's like I know people deal with stuff, and I hear them talk about dealing with stuff, and it seems like they always deal with it. It seems like temptations are always there, or maybe physical ailments. They stick around for a long time, and it's like, okay, I'm still going to pray. Yeah. I'm still going to believe. And then in the meantime, I'm still going to serve Jesus.
Yeah. Well, that was when we were talking about, I think 2 weeks ago, maybe 2, 3, whatever. One, she had an issue of blood, an issue in her blood for 12 years. The other lady was bent over for 18 years. That's a long time.
It's a long time.
Long time.
And they still got the deliverance.
They got the clarity. So they were hopeful through the whole thing. Yeah. And yet, they got the win on the end. Yeah. For sure. But they also had the daily wins. Yeah. So.
Praise God.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So switching gears a little bit, how does Satan put thoughts in our mind? Do we see this in Scripture where he did this? And how does he do it today?
Yeah. Ananias and Sapphira. Peter said, "Why have you let Satan lie to you?" We see the same thing with Eve and Satan in the garden. Take it back to week 1. He said, "You can eat that," and then she said, "It looked good for food." He originated that thought. So we do get those thoughts from him, but they are from, I think many times it seems like they're outside sources. Like if I feel insecure, it's not usually because I just woke up and feel, like I'm a failure today. It's usually because I see somebody doing something so much better.
That's good.
And all of a sudden I feel like, man, I'm just failing.
Yeah.
I mean, I can provide the best I can for my kids, but as soon as I see somebody else's kid with something better, oh man, I am a failure. Look what that kid has. Look what that dad provided. So that was an outside stimulus to my mind that he just uses to role play.
Yeah.
And you have to battle that, man.
Does he use that, or is it just circumstances in the world that we just fall prey to?
Yeah, it's all the above. The world, the flesh, and the devil,
Yeah,
right? Like
right.
the world is an enemy,
It's in
the
there
flesh is an
somewhere.
enemy, but it all originated with him.
Yeah.
Jesus said he's the father of lies. So I blame him for everything.
Yeah, so in the lack of Satan personally attacking us, because you brought that out,
Yeah.
it's not likely that Satan is one individual.
Yep.
He's not
Yep.
the equal opposite of God. He's not
Yeah.
omnipresent. So in the lack of him personally attempting us, how is he doing that today? How is he planting thoughts in our mind today?
Yeah. So whatever he's doing and wherever he's doing, it spreads. So he's the original drop in the pond, and the ripples are just whatever evil we have through other demonic forces that we see in the text, but also their effect on the world, the effect in Hollywood that might affect me in Lakeland. I mean, it might have started there, but it made its way over here. Or something that originated in, maybe we'll blame the Chinese for TikTok and what that has meant to people's minds in the United States of America. What was the purpose of that? I mean, not to blame tech, because we need to be responsible about our own lives. But it seems like anything that has the purpose of hurting people originates with him or one of his spiritual followers. And that absolutely affects the world, which affects us, which affects our flesh.
Yeah. It originates with him, therefore it is him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right on. Let me ask this. Instead of me asking you another question, have you gotten any questions in this series that are thought-provoking? Maybe an email, maybe a text, maybe somebody asked you in passing in relation to this series that you thought that was interesting and that would benefit the body?
Yeah, I don't know if it would benefit anybody. I got a lot of questions regarding the fall and seeing the fall as happening once. I think a lot of times people saw Satan's fall as being prior to Adam and Eve's fall, and then basically him being imperfect in the perfect garden. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's just one of those things we kind of made up along the way, but
yeah, maybe. Or just didn't give thought to.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So in the natural reading, it just your mind automatically, because that was a new concept for me of it all being at one time, Satan falling
Mm-hmm.
and Adam and Eve sinning in the garden, that it all happened at the same time. When Jesus said, "I saw Satan fall like lightning,"
Yep.
You're referencing it to that moment in the garden where he
Yeah.
tempted Eve initially and Adam. I had not conjoined those two happenings together.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of people are. We just had this thought that this is how it played out, and then
Yeah.
you introduce this new idea, or maybe it's not new. I don't know. New to me, probably new for a lot of people. Like, wait, I didn't know that. You know, I didn't know that at all. But it makes sense that why would God did not put anything that was evil or fallen in the garden because He said it was good.
Very good.
Right?
Yeah, it was very good.
So you had a lot of questions around that.
I did. Yeah, just kind of the theme. But a lot, I think people have a lot of questions about Genesis.
Always.
Just in general. And the other, it's just been, we all know what we deal with. We all know we have an enemy. I think people just found encouragement that the comments were more from basically, thanks for encouraging me to fight the fight. Like, let's just we're all battling a battle. So let's just engage. You're not going to win if you don't fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. This series specifically, I feel like it's been one of the more straightforward series that you've done.
Yeah,
Like
for
on,
me,
on a
yeah.
Sunday afterwards, I'm like, there wasn't really a whole lot of gray area
Yeah.
or a whole lot of. I mean, I guess a couple of times maybe it comes up, but Not compared to what maybe will be in this next series, which is going to be great.
Yes.
I'm thoroughly excited for it. But I think at the end of the day, it was a good encouragement for the body to, hey, don't give up.
Yeah.
Follow Jesus. You have an enemy.
Yeah.
Be aware.
Yeah.
And take up the armor of God every single day and fight the enemy. Fight the good fight of faith.
Amen.
Don't lose heart. Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to add on the back end?
No, you summed it up great.
All right, sweet.
like it.
Well, you summed it up at the beginning. I stole it. We want to thank you for joining us for this deep dive discussion. We hope this encouraged you. And again, we'll create conversations with your friends, your family, and in your small groups. Share this with somebody that you feel like needs encouraging and I feel like it would help them. And we'll see you next time.